What if your illness wasn't a malfunction, but a message? In this episode of Everyday Ancestral, I'm joined by Jennifer Payeur, founder of Nature Provides, whose personal health crisis led her away from the conventional system and back to nature, specifically the powerful intelligence of plant stem cells. We talk about what it means to listen to the body, how plant medicine works not just physically, but vibrationally, and why ancestral cultures understood things we're only now beginning to relearn. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me. I am beyond excited because I actually don't know a single thing about plant stem cells. I don't even really understand the concept, so I'm super excited to dig into it. But I want to start though with what was the message you were hearing when you got sick? Like, walk us through that process.
Yeah, so I was in financial services for 29 years. I had been getting messages for probably 10 that I was not aligned to my mission and my purpose. I was very attached to my paycheck and to my lifestyle, and I didn't see any way out. So I felt really stuck. And I first had a health crisis in '08 that led me deep into the natural world. So I literally had a book called Hands of Light fall on my head when I had just received the news that I had bronchitis, tachycardia, pneumonia, shingles, mono for the second year in a row, and finally diagnosed with chronic fatigue.
Oh
So
my goodness.
that drove me into seeking answers because the Ambien, the prednisone, the Xanax just it wasn't working, right? So it was the conventional, here, you need these drugs, you're too wired, you need to chill out, take a Xanax. And so I just kept getting sicker. And book falls on my head. I go to a 4-year healing school while I was still working. I did a 2-year study with the 13 indigenous grandmothers, which is where I really captured and embodied a lot of the ancient wisdom that I
How
carry
did you
today.
know though to even go that direction?
So during the illness, one of my teachers at the healing school said, there's a woman named Florida Mayo. She's the real deal. She's a healer. You should go seek her out and do a session with her. Well, I looked everywhere, far and wide on the internet, couldn't find her. Finally found her out of the blue one day, did a session with her. And at the end of the session, she said, "Oh gosh, I'm late. I've got this class I'm teaching to these students with the grandmothers." And it piqued my interest. And I said, "What is it?" And she said, "It's called the Center for Sacred Studies." And then poof, off she went. So I looked it up, and as soon as the logo came up, it so pulled me in. This is, books fall on my head, logos pull me in. And I was like, I need to go to this 2-year training.
In
Um,
many ways though, you're talking about the fact that you even saw the book falling on your head, and these signs, because in many ways, these signs are always around us, right? But
yeah.
most people don't see them as signs. So, and it sounds like you were living a pretty practical, very unifocused life prior to that. So, what got you even open to looking at life? In what way? Some people would kind of call woo woo, right? I mean, some people
Yeah.
classify this stuff as woo woo, but the reality is it's like I don't look at it like that personally. So that's not my word, but people look at it that way, and it sounds like you weren't very woo-woo before this. So what kind of transitioned you to being open to this kind of spirituality or this kind of different way of looking at life?
Yeah. I mean, I was a kid who was so connected to nature. I was outside any chance I could be outside. I was climbing trees. I was in the ditches. Um, I was the kid laying in the grass, looking up at the clouds, trying to make animal shapes, or looking at the stars, trying to find the constellations. And, I was super intuitive and super sensitive as a kid. And I look back, I was totally in sync, in coherence with nature. And I think that's our authentic state is, in this place. You look to nature, and nature has its cycles. It has all this wisdom and knowledge, and we've become disconnected. And so I think as I grew up, the messaging in my family caused me to shut all that down, right? That's weird, no imaginary friends, don't talk about that. And it was about being practical. Now you need to get a job. And I ended up finding myself in finance because I was good at math. And so I spent, 29 years sitting at a desk with fluorescent lights above me in front of a computer, and it just continued to have this major disconnect. And I think what happened to me during those two major illnesses, the first one in '08 that I just described, and the second one was stage 4 cancer in 2015, is like it took me getting sick to come back to that little girl who was so connected.
So talk about then what did you do? Because stage 4 cancer diagnosis, I mean, most people would see that or hear that as a death sentence. So how did you hear it? And then what did you do?
What I heard, and I have goosebumps as I'm saying this, is I was at a choice point of whether I was gonna stay on the planet or not. And if I was choosing to stay on the planet, I would be supported if I was willing to release this, trauma, this I was living my life very appropriate, not authentic, because I
Mm.
was in something every day that wasn't feeding my soul. It was, you know, giving me a great lifestyle, but I was so disconnected from myself. And, I viewed that stage 4 diagnosis. I was told if you don't do these things, if you don't do chemo and radiation, you will die. Number one. Number two was if you do those, you have a 23% chance of being alive in 5 years. And I knew in that moment that wise intelligence that we all have, innate intelligence in our bodies, my body said, "No way, you're not doing that. It's time for you to get back into alignment, back into an authentic state, and you've gotta do this from the inside out, not the outside in," meaning I had to start listening to my own voice, my own intelligence,
So you
and it's
didn't do
very
any of the chemo. You didn't do any of the chemo. You didn't do any of it.
I did not do the standard of care at all, nope.
Wow.
And again, the messaging, my husband was begging me, my mother was begging me, "Please do what the doctors are telling you." And I said, "For the first time, I've gotta do what my soul is telling me, and it's not that." And I remember having this pretty difficult discussion with my husband. He said, "What if you die?" And I said, "Then I'm dying on my terms."
Oh my gosh, Jen. I'm getting chills myself because not only because of the power of what you just shared, but so there was this what I called intuitive, but other people might say psychic, right? So that there was this intuitive in my wife and my life, who we had known for many years and who was always very kind of very dialed in. Like she would say stuff and share thoughts that were just like, "How did you know this?" And I don't want to. The story is not about that, but it's more about when she got diagnosed with cancer. Um, she had they had found a tumor, and after she got the diagnosis, she went home, and then she basically asked the spirits that she normally can access. She said, "Okay, what's the message here? What do you want me to know? Because I'm ready to listen, and I'll do whatever you say." And she heard, "We need you to stop being an intuitive. Like, we need you to stop reading people and just self-care. Just be with yourself." And so she said, "Done." And she that day called everyone that she had appointments set for. She gave them all up. She literally did exactly that. And no joke, 2 weeks later, when she had another appointment for them to check the tumor, it was gone. So I'm just getting chills because sometimes I wonder if that is the message of like, you need to realign, and those that fight it go down a very different path than those that just listen and realign. So can you share more about what a listening and realigning looked like for you?
Yeah, I was somebody who was always in motion. That first time I got sick, I was working 20 hours a day. I had a corporate apartment on India Street in Boston, and I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, I was gaining weight. The signs were all there, was overriding everything. And then I would come home on Thursday night or Friday morning, and then I had to kick into being super mom. I have 4 kiddos. And the guilt of being gone, Sunday night through Thursday or Friday, kicked in. And so I was just living on fumes and constantly in motion. So what was required of me to get back into alignment was to stop and be still. And same thing, I mean, I had a healing practice on the side while working these crazy hours, and I had to just be in stillness, be inward, and listen to the messages. And they, to the point you made at the beginning, James, they were there all along. I just overrode them. I overrode them from sheer will and survival. So I was living in fight or flight. And my body was like, I'm tired. Can you just stop? And the other thing it really required was getting out of fear. Fear kind of shrinks our energy field, it shuts down our immune system. And so I looked at it and said, okay, I'm in the great unraveling. That's what I called that period of my life. I'm unraveling the programming of no pain, no gain. Don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about. Keep pushing through. Don't quit anything. Don't be a quitter, right? All the programming that I had in my childhood came up. And I realized at the center of all of it was this place that didn't feel worthy. So I spent most of my career proving I'm a good person, I'm worthy, right? And that's what was in the center of it all. And I believe that's true. Illness, especially cancer, there are really three pieces to it. You've got an immune system that's, not optimal. You have a toxic burden of some kind in your body, and that could be emotional toxins too. And then you have trauma. You have unresolved trauma, something that's running in the background telling you something that's not true. So to me, I say this loudly and proudly that going through stage 4 cancer was the best thing that happened to me because it brought me into a place of stillness, moving out of being appropriate to being authentic and to living my best life with joy, with freedom, with, all the great things. And now I've got currency in my tank, in my spirit, where I can soar now and not just be in that, shut down place that I lived in for so long.
Incredible. I mean, well, I'm just so happy that you are around for us, not only for me to get to know you, but also for us to have this conversation and that you've learned that lesson that you can impart to people. I mean, I think it's a tough lesson for people to learn, but it's
Yeah.
so important, that realignment. I'm curious though, how did so we're talking kind of energetic shifts,
Yep.
mindset shifts. Were there shifts around how you ate? Did you sleep more? Like, what are some more practical shifts that happened?
Yeah, you're gonna like this part. So I had been vegetarian for about 8 years, and I even did the vegan thing for a year and raw food for a year. And I was 25 pounds lighter than I am now. I mean, I was a size double zero. And I went through menopause early because of all of that. And so a big piece was listening to my body and eating what my body wanted versus doing what I was told would be the best thing for me without knowing me. And so
Mm.
I started incorporating grass-fed, grass-finished meats and, whole foods. I started eating like my ancestors. I grew up with a mom who had to eat liver every week. And so she said, I will never make you kids eat liver. Well, come on, mom, liver's good for me. So I started buying ground beef with organ meats in it, and just kind of sneaking it into my family because they would have said like that's gross. I found ways to make it taste good, and so I came back to I think an ancestral diet, and I think that was a huge part of my healing. And then I did all kinds of things like hyperbaric oxygen chamber, just doing different things for my body, high dose vitamin C. And really, the biggest thing was paying attention to the messages and listening. And I believe we're all guided. We all get these messages. We've just been taught to not listen to them and to shut them down.
Yeah,
And
to
so
not
I
see
really,
them as messages, right?
yes, and I really feel like from, 2008 on, I have been so divinely guided in my life that everything kind of just falls into place and works.
Mm. Yeah, take that in for a second, right? That there's something bigger than ourselves and that it's on our side. That the universe has our back. That's a really hard one for people to really take in because
Yeah,
it's
because 'cause we're used to controlling, right? And
yeah.
and needing to know the outcome. And it's letting go of that and knowing. And just one other thing I want to add, because I think this is an important piece, is that our bodies are always wanting to be in balance. That is our body's natural state, is vital and healthy and in flow. And one of the things I started doing as I was healing was thanking my body. Imagine that. Giving thanks, having gratitude. Thank you for carrying me every day. I was a rough and tough tomboy. I was an athlete, and I'd get kicked in the throat in soccer and I'd get right back up. And, I'm like, wow, thank you for all the abuse you've endured with my sports and my, not listening and under eating and over exercising and all the things. And just even that allowed me to reconnect to my body. So, what they tell us is, oh, cancer is your body attacking itself, autoimmune, your body's attack. Our bodies don't attack ourselves. Our bodies are always trying to give us messages to be in coherence.
Mm. That's a really nice change, different way of looking at it. I'm feeling called to share this, but so my daughter's been really struggling for the last week, really, for the last 5 days with this nausea and this stomach. Something was going on. I don't know what it is, but just did not feel good, particularly at night. And last night, I was reminded, I suddenly had this strong feeling that I'm going to walk her through a healing process. And as she was kind of falling asleep, I whispered in her ear and I was walking her through, I want you to breathe into your body, release things, and like basically brought this healing gold light, what some people would say is God, or like, just like reminding her that her body wants to heal and that she is a healer. And like literally did a creative visualization of that process, and then as the light is filling her body, like thank it, really, be grateful for this healing. So that's what made me, when you just said being grateful for your body, reminded me of what I did last night. And no joke, Jen, she woke up like feeling and I even told her, I set her up, I said, and you're going to wake up feeling energetic and alive and ready to take on the day. And you're not going to even remember feeling ill and sick. And you're going to be so vibrant. And she totally woke exactly. She was beautifully fine today. So you're just reminding me of like, shifting that energy to, like bringing lightness into the body, shifting the perspective, being grateful. These things are real. They are
Yes.
not this woo woo kind of like, oh, that's for someone else to do. It's like, I welcome everyone to try it because it is life changing.
Hmm. Yep. And knowing that, right? And trusting our bodies. Again, in my generation, I was taught to disconnect from the body.
Right.
And right. And it's fascinating, because I'm in the healing space now, in the natural healing space. One of my favorite people, Dr. Zach Bush, says, we're all going to die. We all are. And yet we spend most of our lives not fully living. And that really has struck, just an energy in me to say, yeah, when you're not yourself, when you're not trusting your body, when you're not listening to the messages, you're not fully living.
Mm.
That's who we are. If you believe we're souls having a human experience.
Yeah, I love Zach Bush as well, but we got to get him eating meat again. He was, he's like not eating meat, but um, tell me where did plant stem cells come in? Can you talk about that? Because I remember when you shared that with me when we met, I was like, I don't even know what that is. How do you get it? Like I had no clue, but it sounds like it's extremely powerful therapeutic support system for the human body.
Yeah, let me tell you what they are, and then I'll give you a little bit of the history of them. So, this is what they look like. They're a tincture in a body. The plants come from the new growth on the plant in the springtime.
It's like
So, if you
a sprout
the
basically.
sprout, yeah, it's like the little buds on the trees. And that bud contains an undifferentiated aspect of that plant. So, like in an essential oil, you're getting the leaves of the eucalyptus tree. Well, here you're getting the entire potential, the undifferentiated part of the plant before it becomes a stem, a leaf, a flower, a root. And so you're getting all of the vital energy of that plant.
At its most
And
vibrant part,
at
right?
its most vibrant in the springtime, right?
Right,
Before it opens up.
right.
And so they have a biologic impact in the body, so physical impact, and they also have an energetic because of that new growth potential. So all of the plants that we use are growing naturally in the Italian Alps, which is
Very
considered
clean,
one of the
very
most
pure.
pristine parts in our planet. No heavy metals, not sprayed with anything. And because you're getting that new growth, it hasn't been weathered by life like an adult plant has. So I use two analogies. One is, we know broccoli is good for us, but broccoli sprouts contain something called sulforaphane in abundance that's really good for people with cancer and chronic illness. Same thing. An adult plant works for us, in a tincture form. But in this form, you're getting just pure consciousness, energy, vitality, and you're getting healing properties for the body. Every aspect of the plant, kind of like you talk about eating the whole, animal, nose to tail. It's the same thing with these is you're getting every aspect of that plant in that vital phase. So we actually have a group of botanists who have to go identify the plant because it's just literally growing in the wild. And they identify the plant and then they pick those buds by hand. They never pick more than 20% because we don't want to harm the plant. We want it to thrive. And then within a couple of hours of picking that bud, they have to get down off the mountain and get them into organic grape alcohol and glycerin, which is what extracts the active principles from the plant. So it macerates for 30 days. And then we have a spagyric process, which is an ancient alchemical process, 400 years old, where they take whatever plant material hasn't broken down in the maceration process. They press it, they burn it in 120 degrees Celsius oven, really hot, and they extract the cell salts and the oligo elements from that plant. And then it has a natural spiralization process like 1,000 times a day, so it becomes super bioavailable in the body.
How was that discovered? Is this like an ancestral practice, a healing modality, or how
Yeah,
did they
so
know to do that?
that's the history. So, and it's again divinely guided on how these plants found me. But I started doing research, and there was a woman, Hildegard of Bingen, who was born in 1108, and in 1158 or 59, she wrote a book called Physica, and she talked about the buds of 8 trees. And it's fascinating because she was considered the first true naturopath. She would tell people, drink clean water, eat clean food, get out in the sunshine, right? This was back in the 1158. And then she talked about the buds of 8 trees that she said could bring full healing and vibration to your body. And then for 800 years, you can't find anything, nothing in writing anywhere. And in 1958, a homeopath and an MD named Dr. Paul Henri found them and started experimenting with them and said, wow, these are cleaning up the liver and the kidneys and the organs in the body. This is interesting. And then his student, Max Tuteau, who was probably the most well-known, said, well, wait a minute. No, these are cleaning up the cells in the body, not just the organs, but the cells. And for people with chronic illness, this is really important. And now today, probably the most famous guy is an Italian who's in Romania, of all places. And he's saying, no, these are cleaning up the metabolic issues in the body. They're cleaning up the mitochondria. So they work on the cell, the tissue, and the organ. And I personally, my belief and when I've listened to these plants, what they've told me is we are coming out at a time where the world is the most toxic it's been. We've got air, food, and water, all toxic. Emotions, toxic. We're in the great divide, right? Get triggered easily. And these plants, this is what they specialize in, is cleaning up. They're known as drainage remedies. So they're cleaning up that toxic burden in the body, even the emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects. And they are cleaning up the fascia, our extracellular matrix, bringing that into coherence, which is our communication network. And then the last thing they do, like a human stem cells, they regenerate things that are broken down in the body. So they're pretty magical.
Wow. And did you use some of these stem cells, the plant stem cells, to heal, or is
Yes.
this something you found later?
Yeah, no, so big cancer journey 2015. I was considered in remission a year later. In 2018, my cancer marker started going up, which is a classic sign of reoccurrence. And I'm like, I'm done with this. I'm complete. I knew I was complete, but there was still something out of alignment. I was still trying to figure out my purpose. And a friend called me up and she said, "Why don't you come do a session with my husband?" And I said, "Okay, great." So I did. And it was a great session. And at the end, he brought this tincture out and he said, "This has saved a lot of my patients' lives." And I'm like, "Oh, it's great. What is it?" And he said, "Embryonic plant stem cells." And James, I felt like I was struck by lightning. I don't know how else to say it. I literally felt this wash of energy come over me. And I looked him in the eye and I said, "What is it? How does it work? Why does it work? I need to know everything." And he's like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 calm down, calm down." And that was in October of 2018. And he said, "There's a training coming up in January of 2019. Why don't you see if you can get invited?" I said, "All right." And it was for doctors, and I'm not a doctor, but holistic health practitioner. So I got myself invited. And on the last day of the training, the prior owner said, "And I'm going to be selling the company." And whoosh, there comes that same sign. And I get to the airport and I called my husband and I said, "We're going to be buying a plant stem cell company." And he said, "You are never allowed to go to another training event again." "What are you talking about, lady?" So I came home and I said, "This doesn't make sense. I'm a finance person." And I meditated for 2 months. And then I called the guy who taught the class and I said, "Put me on a protocol. I got to try these." And 2 months
Oh,
later,
so you
my
wanted to
cancer
buy the
marker.
company and you hadn't even tried it.
No, because we had a week-long immersion class with no product. Right, and I'm an experiential learner. So it was all up here. 1 week of training, he puts me on a protocol, and 2 months later, my cancer markers are back in the normal range. So I did what
Wow.
any ex-banker would do. I picked up the phone and I called a psychic, and I said, "Elena, I'm thinking about buying a company. It doesn't make any sense. I need you to tell me what you see." And she said, "Oh, Jennifer, I see light coming into the body, cleaning up the debris that's not supposed to be there, and returning the original blueprint for that person by the company." I said, "Okay, great. Thank you." Click. And that was it. I bought the company with a week of training and a little nod from a psychic. And I wasn't even, I kind of was, left brained most of my life. I'm like, well, I know I get these signs, so I'll just do this. And in August of 2019, I became the steward of these amazing plant stem cell remedies. And I've seen nothing short of miracles with people and working with them and in my own health. I
What so
haven't been sick since.
Yeah, what are some of the miracles you're seeing from customers?
you know, um, Acid reflux, like gut dysbiosis, parasites get cleaned up, joint and muscle aches and pains, arthritis, cancer. There are some great plants for cancer. And the reason these plants work is if you look at the materia medica of adult plants, we know plants have an affinity for different organs in the body and different systems in the body. Like, most people know milk thistle is good for the liver, right? And so, it works the same way in the baby plant world in this space with the plant stem cells. So this new growth has the stem cells of the plant, but also has polyphenols, it has exosomes, peptides, all the things that we are isolating now as for supplements are all in the plant stem cell tincture. And so they can pretty much work on anything. Allergies, phenomenal for allergies, histamine reactions. So they're pretty incredible.
It it's fascinating because, well, first of all, let me ask this. You mentioned the 8 trees, right? So,
Yes.
is there one tincture that has all 8? Like, what explain that. Like, because do you understand that piece of it now that you own the company and have kinda dug into it more? Because I'm really curious about that. Like, it's almost like, here's the tree of life, you need these 8, and
Yeah.
you find absolute, connection to.
Yeah, well, we have about 90 single plants and about 30 complexes. So a complex is just a grouping of plants that play well together for a particular issue. So, we have something called Allergy Lift. And that one's fascinating. This is a great story. So our scientific director said if you take Allergy Lift long enough, um, you will overcome the allergy, kind of like getting an allergy shot. And I said, that's interesting. So I mentioned it to my brother who has lived in Japan for 28 years. And his wife, Japanese, was allergic to shrimp. And that's not a good thing in Japan because you have shrimp all the time, right? So she stopped eating shrimp at age 9 and she was 41 at the time. This was about 4 years ago. And she took it upon herself to just start taking Allergy Lift, this complex of plants. And she took it for 5 months and wasn't even really thinking much about it. Goes in for her annual checkup, and the doctor is going in and out of the room with her, and he's like scratching his head. And she finally said, "Is something wrong?" Like she got scared for a minute. She's like, "Is something the matter? Is something wrong?" And he goes, "This doesn't make sense. You're not showing an allergy to shrimp anymore. This isn't possible." And so she's now going to be 45. She's eating shrimp,
And no issues.
no issues. So it's really fascinating, right? How when you give the body what it needs and you clear out of the way what's in the way, the body can heal.
But in a sense, it's almost like you're saying that nature will like, all we need to do is get in sync with what nature already provides.
And guess what the name of my company is? Nature Provides.
I
For
did
that
not plant
reason.
that for you either.
I know that was perfect.
Yeah.
No, it's true. You can look to nature and you see the cycles and, plants find a way to survive and thrive despite, wind and floods and droughts and they communicate. They have 22 senses. So plants are very fascinating. They're alive and they have a consciousness and an energy. And what I was taught when I worked with the grandmothers, this ancestral wisdom, and what the indigenous know is that plants have been around a lot longer than people. They are our elders, they're our teachers, and they're showing us how to come back to our core.
Well, and it also speaks to something that we've talked about on previous episodes, which is, when I had a few people around plant medicine, like specifically like ayahuasca, those kind of plant medicines. And we were talking about how the plants in the DNA of the plant is history and time
Yes.
and knowledge. And that your point that if you serve the plant, if you get in congruence with the plant, you serve it, honor it,
Yes.
that it will provide you those answers.
Yeah, and one of the things I learned from the grandmothers too is if you take a seed and you put it in your mouth, you're giving that seed your DNA and it will grow exactly in a way that you need. I still today that I am so amazed by that. So as a gardener, I do that when I plant seeds.
Wow, you stick them in your mouth and then plant them.
Yeah, and I did it with, when my kids were younger. I was like, "All right, this is your plant, PJ. Okay, Katie, this is your plant. Okay, Ben."
Wow,
So
that's
it's
really
incredible.
powerful.
Yeah, so they're carriers of information just like water. And
Right.
these plants have structured water in them, in the buds of the plant, natural structured water. And a couple of years ago, our scientific director was walking by his lab and one of the test tubes lit up. It was this fluorescent blue, kind of like this color here. And he said, "Oh my gosh, what is this?" And he put it under a microscope and he saw these dodecahedron shapes. A dodecahedron looks like a soccer ball. And he said, "What is this?" And so he started studying it and he saw this fluorescent light coming out of the water from these plant buds, which is insane, right? And that, when he told me that, I said, that explains what the psychic said all those years ago, is that light. They're bringing light into the body. They're bringing that informational, generational information into the body so it can heal.
Oh, incredibly powerful. Okay, couple of questions. Are there any downsides? Or is it one of those things that because it's from nature, like you can take it and it's either going to work for you or not, but it's not going to hurt you?
Yeah, I had this theory that you couldn't take too much. You can.
Okay.
I took some niacin one day, and I probably had this much left in the bottle. I don't know, probably about 80 drops, and I kind of just poured it in my glass, and I drank it, and I had a niacin flush. That happened to me probably 20 years ago when I took vitamin C because the plant that I took, black currant, is full of vitamin C. So I caused a chemical reaction in my body. It went away in 20 minutes, but not what I'd recommend. Um, so I'm a big believer, less is more. And, again, it's information, it's light, and it has a physical, impact in the body. I just turned 60. I feel like I'm 30. So this
Yeah,
coming
you do.
from
You, I'm shocked. I did not know you just turned 60. You look 30 in real life. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
thank
incredible.
you. And I feel it, and that's the big thing. I have a healing practice here in Charlotte, and I was meeting with a woman, she's 67, so we're 7 years apart biologically. And she made the comment to me, "Wow, I feel like I'm 100." So we're 70 years apart in how we feel. And I feel vibrant, I feel alive, I have energy, I don't get sick. So, and I've been working with these plants now for 6 years. And when I say working with, I do, this is the woo woo part of me. I'll out myself here. When I worked with the grandmothers, they gave us a reading when we were graduating. And one of the grandmothers told me, she said, you're a spirit guide, you're a medium, you channel information. And the plants started talking to me. So I can sit with somebody and the plants will tell me which plants will help that person come into their full divine blueprint. And it's a kind of a strange, unique, but lovely thing. And they guide me. So I really do look at them as elders and guides. And it's fascinating with what happens on our planet. Different plants kind of come to the forefront. Right now, lemon tree has kind of been at the forefront for the last 5 months. And lemon tree creates balance in our pH. That's the physical, right? It helps with digestion. That's physical, but it also helps us digest what's happening in the world. That's emotional and very uplifting, right? And right now, where it's so polarized ends with the politics and all the things that have been going on in our world for the last 5 years, and lemon tree's like, I can help bring people back together. I can
Mm.
help uplift them and remind them that we're all connected. We're all one. And so, that plant has been at the forefront. There have been a few others. So I'm excited to see what happens in 2026 because the energies are changing, right? Where we finished a cycle 9. If you add up 2 plus 2 plus 5 for 2025, that's a 9 cycle. So we've been completing patterns, completing things we started 20 years ago. And we're coming into a 1, which is the sun, aligned to the sun energy. So we're in new beginnings. So it'll be interesting to see what humanity does in this pivotal moment. I know where I'm taking in a completely different direction, but
No,
it's
no,
all guidance from the plants.
yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, is that an example of vibrational medicine? Or how would you describe vibrational medicine?
Yeah, 100%. That's the frequency of these plants, from the spagyric process to the cellular water in the plants to what they contain in them. They are bringing our frequency up. And, we need it because the
Yeah.
Earth's frequency is changing. We're getting all these solar flares that are changing the frequency. The Earth's frequency has been at 7.83 hertz for forever, and now it's changing in big ways. And so we're changing in big ways because we're connected.
And of
So
course,
yeah,
modern society, the life we're choosing to live in, it's like that's also potentially out of congruence with what our bodies would normally be familiar with. So we have to adjust. We either have to adjust the lifestyle or we have to adjust the tools that we use to support us in that lifestyle.
yeah. I mean, our ancestors used to get up when the sun came up, right? They would be outside in nature working. They would come in, they would eat a meal, and they would go to bed when the sun went down. They didn't have electricity.
Yeah.
And they would eat local. So many things we've gotten out of congruence with. One of my favorite books is by an author named Richard Love, who wrote a book called The Last Child in the Woods, and he coined this phrase, nature deficit disorder. And he said, we are becoming so disconnected to nature that it's affecting our neurology. It's affecting our biology. And he compared it to when you have a baby, babies crawl first and then they walk. And the babies that skip the crawling phase, which is rare, but it does happen, they miss synapse connections in the brain. It's the same thing when we don't connect to nature as young children. We're missing synapses, memory, ancient memory that doesn't get passed on to us. And then the other term he coined was nature knowledge deficit. And he said, we don't even know where our food comes from, right? And especially in North America, we eat whatever we want whenever we want it. We can eat bananas in December and January and pineapple and anything. And it's throwing us out of our natural cycles.
Yeah. I mean, and what I love too about what you're introducing around plant stem cells is, plants in general and certain diets and certain, on social media right now are really getting a lot of hate, right? There's a lot of like people saying, don't eat this, don't eat that, all these things that people historically have been told to eat a lot of.
Hmm.
And I think, well, let me ask you, what do you think the biggest misunderstanding people have about plants? What do you think that is?
Um, it goes in cycles, right? I think people are now getting fearful of plants. So high oxalates, high this, high that. And yes, there are circumstances of that. But I think the biggest misconception of plants is that they aren't alive, that they aren't working with us on some level, that they don't have a consciousness, that they're just sitting in a pot or just growing out in nature. Um, Plants do have a consciousness. Just like your animals, plants know when you leave your house and when you're coming back. And we know that now because they've put electrodes on plants. In this book called What Do Plants Talk About? This scientist started putting electrodes on his plant and he tore a leaf off. And you could actually see the fear, like the fear was showing up in the machine where he was tracking what the plant was feeling. And then he lit a match on one of the leaves. Same thing. It reacted in the same way. And so then he stopped torturing the plant, if you will, and he just sat near it with the lighter and the scissors in his hand, and the plant reacted the same way, even though he wasn't actually cutting it.
Almost like it had trauma.
It had trauma. And
Wow.
it knew it was bracing itself. It knew something was coming. And the other thing is there are machines that you can hook up to a plant and it plays a song. So, again, everything is energy, everything is consciousness, and plants have a consciousness. That's why as a reformed vegetarian vegan, and I look at when people say, "Oh, I don't eat meat because it's a social issue or it's this." Well, guess what? You're killing a plant too.
Yeah.
It's the same consciousness.
Yeah, I'm
So
always
that's
saying
the
that.
reason.
I'm
Yeah.
equally always saying that, just telling people that no matter what, if If you're eating something to live, then that means something is dying for you to do that. And it even extends, of course, to when you're plowing the fields of those plants, the animals that die from the plowing. So there's always something.
Yeah.
And that to me just kind of is even more food for thought that it's important to honor the process of
Yes.
life, right? The cycle of life that if whether it's a plant, an animal, that you should honor that it's giving itself to your survival.
Yes. Yeah, they're in service to us, right?
Yeah.
And, gratitude, we know, carries an energetic, frequency, a high one. And imagine if you're giving thanks to your food, you're blessing your food, no matter what you're eating. When I work with each plant, I thank it. It's just like I thank my body every day now. That's one of my rituals is I thank my body every day for carrying me, for creating the brilliance of my life, and I thank the plants and I thank the animals. It's a great practice to have because it creates an energetic frequency, a higher one.
Yeah, I really appreciate this conversation. Um, I'm wondering if someone hearing this conversation is just inspired to go to the site to purchase some of the stem cells, is there some place like, where does someone start? Is there, like, a blend that is just kind of good for everyone to try, or is there a different process?
Yeah. So, I think there are three areas of the body that need the most support right now. Our central nervous system, because as a society we're living in fight or flight. If you don't resolve the central nervous system and get it out of that state, it's really hard for the body to take anything in because it doesn't feel safe. So I think anybody can do that. We've got a complex called Stress Free that's really good. It's got all the plants in there that help calm the nervous system and bring the system back into balance. The lymphatic system is a second system that I think needs support because we're not moving as much as we used to, and we all need lymph support. And then the third is the liver, with the toxic burden we're carrying. So we've got liver detox, lymph health, and stress free. And I think those three, anybody, even totally healthy, can benefit from those plants. And again, it's helping to evolve your consciousness, your own frequency, your vibration in your body, and it's helping those systems physically in the body. And you can find those on health.nature-provides.com.
Excellent. And is what about for kids? They're okay for kids, I assume?
Yeah, I've used these with 2-month-old kids. I've used them with animals. I have a chapter in my book that talks specifically about animals, and I've used them, I think, as old as 95-year elderly. You don't need a lot with kids. So, with a 7 or 8-year-old, a couple of drops 2 times a day. There are, believe it or not, 1,875 drops in a bottle. Ask me how I know that because we got that question so many times. How will this last? How long will this last? So at that rate, a bottle would last you about 6 months. These have a 10-year shelf life, so they last forever. They're safe to use. With people, I've had people that are alcoholics or don't like alcohol. These are in organic grape alcohol and glycerin. That's the only thing in the bottle besides the active principles of the plant. I tell them heat up some water, not to a rolling boil, but hot. You can put the tincture in there, let it sit for 15 minutes, and the alcohol will dissipate, and you're just getting the the active principles of the plant.
What is inherently then the difference between plant stem cells, and taking them and essential oils? Is one through olfactory and one is ingested? Is that really
Yeah, so, I the way I describe it, because I also work with essential oils, is I use essential oils outside in. So yes, they're going through the limbic system and the olfactory, but I typically use them more topically. If somebody has a wound that's not healing, I can work on that. They have sinus stuff, you can work with that. And I consider the plant stem cells as inside out because you're literally changing the old patterns, the mindset, the consciousness, and the physical vehicle that we all show up in every day. So they're an inside job and the other ones are outside to me.
But they can coexist, basically.
Yeah, and that's the best thing about plant stem cells is they can coexist even with pharmaceuticals. They can coexist with other supplements. They play nicely with all other things because they are bringing coherence and frequency into the body. And so I have people come to me and say, I've been on a statin for 5 years. I want to get off. And, I always make sure they're working with their doctor, but I'll start them on, 2 or 3. And before you know it, they don't need the statin anymore. And so then they can come off. Same thing with heart medicines. I've seen it happen over and over and over again. So, and allergy meds and acid reflux, protein pump inhibitors. So that's the beauty is they will start to create that coherence, and then the pharmaceutical or whatever else they might be utilizing, just they don't need it anymore. When I bought the company, one of the messages that I got from the plants was, "You don't own us." Humans like to own things. We say, "Oh, I own this land. I own this. I own that." And their message to me was, "You're not the owner of us. You're the steward." It's a very different vibration and frequency. And they said, your role is to get these out to the world at a time where the world is so toxic and needs the support and to help the shift. And so I took that seriously. I wrote a book. There are about 10 books still in publication, but they're very hard to follow. They're either too scientific or too basic. And so I wrote a book called Ancient Plant Wisdom. And I have a mini materia medica in the center to tell you what each plant does. And I filmed a documentary. And so, I'm like, okay, I'm being a good steward. So I've done 2 pretty big projects this year that came out. Our documentary just won 5 more awards. So we've won about 18 film festival awards now. And I think it gives people hope that, a stage 4 diagnosis, a serious diagnosis, you can shift it. You can shift it. It requires a shift in mindset. It requires a shift in behavior. And as Dr. Joe Dispenza says, why do we wait until we get sick to change? I was one of those people that waited until I got sick to change. But now I feel fully aligned to my mission, my purpose. I feel vital, vibrant. And so I'm going to keep going.
I love it. I remember my question. Wow. There's nothing more ancestral than that. It's nature being able to help you get off of some of these modern pharma, like nature winning out. I love that. So final question. I've been now asking everyone this. If you could wave a magic wand and bring back one ancestral practice, what would it be?
Gratitude for all things because we know we're connected to everything.
Love that. Jen, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I really appreciate your time. And I'm just so grateful that we were inspired to have this conversation today, that we hadn't connected the dots because we've known each other for a bit. And like, I'm
Yeah, for a
shocked that
few
we didn't
years.
connect the dots, right? To be like, hey,
Yeah.
you should be on the show. But I'm so glad we made it happen. This has been a real gift. I'm really excited to share this with everyone. And I've gotten a lot from it. So I really, really appreciate you and looking forward to what's coming in the new year for you. And congrats on the book. Congrats on the documentary. It's huge. It's a huge gift when something that people could interpret as a death sentence shows up and you reinterpret it as a way, an opportunity to change, and then look at what this change brings. A new company that's supporting so many people, a documentary that's supporting people's health, and then a book as well. It's like the bounty you have created from what most people would see as like I said, a death sentence is really inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. Such an honor to be with you. I love what you're doing. And, you have a big mission as well. So I love the message you're getting out. to the world.
Thank you. Well, and thank you all. This is, once again, I'm just so grateful to be able to talk with the guests and share these interviews with you. If you're enjoying them, please leave a review, leave a comment here at Everyday Ancestral. We want to know how this is affecting you. So rate us, share with your friends. Just let us know. We love those comments. We really do read them, and just we're so grateful for your continued support in getting these messages out. So thank you all, and as I always say, stay curious. Thank you so much for joining me on Everyday Ancestral. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. You can find the show notes, links, and resources mentioned at eatpluck.com. That's EATPLUCK.com. And hey, if you know someone who'd get something out of this, share it with them too. Stay curious, live well, and keep it ancestral.